Hey folks, Steve here with a special review video for you today. We're going to be talking about Baptism by Fire, an entry in the BCS series published by MMP and game designed by Dean Essig. This is going to be a shorter review. I'm not going to do the full style that I sometimes do because this is a review for a game in a series. I've talked about the series in other places. I did a recent review of AirCore, and so I feel like I can do a shorter review and kind of give my thoughts on Baptism by Fire itself and kind of its place in the BCS series. So, first of all, I should point out this review is based on my solitaire playthrough that I played on the channel. If you want to watch that, that's available there on the channel. I will say, and this will not impact the review of the game in terms of its quality, I misplayed the allies significantly. I failed to use the defensive tools at my disposal, leveraging the terrain, and it was an Axis victory. I don't think that's a failing of the game. That's a failing of me, just not figuring out my own puzzle to solve there. And I didn't want to let that one thing color this review. So if you were to watch that and see the Axis performing very well, I want to upfront say I made some mistakes. I don't think the game is imbalanced. I think I failed to do some things that I really should have done. And that's what happens in war games sometimes. Now, I want to connect this to uh, the BCS system as a whole because if you've watched my other coverage of the BCS series, you'll understand that I quite like the series a lot. I think it is really fun. I think a lot of the mechanics, what it does, is very interesting. And I made a list of all the things that when you try to make that determination of is a game in a series distinct enough to be its own experience, right? Are you just playing the same sort of thing? Well, BCS is not the kind of hex and counter war game where units just have a strength, a defense, an attack factor, and a defense factor, and movement, and maybe a couple of extra things on top of that. Um, there's a wide range of variables at play that really alter a game and make a unique experience. And I try to write down some of these things. So when you talk about like the context of the game campaign, you're worried about weather, you're worried about terrain, and most many war games do. You are worried about the road network. Logistics are important. Command and control is really important. Uh, Whether or not the enemy has gone into some sort of prepared defense matters, and you need to think your way through that. Whether or not you have any additional air points for additional support, what the visibility level is of the map to see your enemy and maybe call in an artillery strike on them. That matters a lot and can change even from turn to turn in some games, though visibility in this game is pretty constant throughout. You have the size of the formation that you're activating. So as each activation occurs, you're moving just one formation of battalions, but what you can do with that formation might vary by how big it is. How many units are actually in that formation? There might be quite a lot. Maybe you have 8 units, or maybe you just have 3, or maybe even less than that. And that can affect what you need to think about, what you're going to do, how are you going to make that formation useful. What also matters is the HQ for that formation's range. How far can they operate? Which also means that if the HQ has shorter range, that is actually more dangerous when your units need to retreat because you may need to bring your HQ really far forward. It also matters how much intrinsic artillery the HQ has, its reactivation value. So you can have a pretty, there's all these different um, axes upon which a unit, even an HQ, can be on to tell you what is it going to be capable of. It might have large range, which can affect it. I mean, it's going to be relatively safe. Its ability to project artillery is very far. However, it might have an activation rating, a reactivation rating of a 6, and means you're not going to get a double activation. They're going to be slow plotting formations. That's a distinct characteristic of that formation, a key characteristic. You have for the battalions themselves, how many steps do they have, their movement type, their armor value if they have one, action rating, whether or not they're considered hard, which most armor tends to be hard, meaning they're harder to hurt with artillery attacks? Are they is the unit a mechanized infantry, which is a distinct sort of function that they can execute if they have tactical movement that are attack capable? And are they recon units? And there's a whole set of things that come with a recon unit above and beyond what a normal unit can do. So I had to write it down and really had to think about it because in Baptism by Fire, all of those different characteristics are different from, say, Aerocorps or Panzer's Last Stand, which are the games I've played the most of BCS prior to this one. And it is very distinct. It's a distinct situation. Now, obviously, the map being Tunisia near Kasserine, there are certain things that are going to come with that, right? Wide open desert, the mountains, and the pass through the mountains being critical choke points. Those things are all factors in this game. But again, the rest of those attributes of what's on the counters and how things play out are very, very different. And you have to play to that. You have to learn for each side the strengths and the capabilities of your formations and really learn how to use them in the terrain of the map. And you could say that for maybe almost any war game, but in particular, I think BCS does a really good job of, like I said, like giving you the algorithm, right? Here's how all these parts work together with standard procedures. You're going to do a firing engagement. You're going to do attack by fire or a shock attack or an attack, and a bombardment. But all those things I just mentioned are variables in that algorithm, and you can end up with very different types of consequences for that. So for the Americans, their action ratings tend to be so low, especially in the early parts of the campaign, that they're going to get ripped up by the Germans. They can't even really counterattack. And so you have to rely on other things to try to stall and delay the Germans and get into good defensive positions. And that's its own puzzle that I failed to properly solve. But it provides a really interesting game experience as you try to figure that out. Certainly, the terrain of the map, being in Tunisia, it feels very distinct from my play of Panzer's Last Stand. It feels distinct from Aerocorps. When you look at the map, when you see the wide open desert, particularly on the eastern part of the map, there is no flank. You can't anchor your flank on anything. It's just the desert. Your forces are out there. At best, you're trying to figure out, are you going to retreat down the road? Can you hold the critical road junctions that are really the main path of supply? But the tracks provide flexibility that you're going to have to keep in mind for you and your opponent. And eventually, you start working your way and dealing with things on the western side of the map where the mountain ridges are there. Excuse me. And you can set up a defense in some of the choke points. So figuring out, how you can operate in these different bits of terrain, the nature of the Kasserine campaign does come to light here, and then with these special rules like mines and just again that coming down to the capabilities of the forces and the command indecision of the Axis ends up creating a really interesting narrative like BCS tends to be able to create that I found really quite enjoyable. So again, saying my praise of the BCS system, that praise continues here. And I will point out that the game, as is, at least the copy that I got when I bought it, had the Series 1.1 rules. I did play this with the 2.0 rules. So all my praise of the system is based on the 2.0 version of the rules. So if you were to get this game now, open up the box, and you have the 1.1 rules, you can play with that. That's fine. I would probably still recommend either printing off or somehow getting a copy of the 2.0 rules that I believe are in Panzer's Last Stand, Aerocorps, Valley of Tears. Those are the latest version of the rules and charts. You can also print those off the MMP website. I think those are going to be better to use, so just a recommendation in case you pick up a copy of this secondhand or however you get it, and you have the earlier versions of the rules. So BCS system, very strong, I think, in its implementation for this particular campaign. Very entertaining, very interesting. If there are cons, it really comes down to a couple of things. One, I wish that there were not victory point hexes at the edge of the map. I was frustrated by that a little bit in Aerocorps, but it's actually worse here, where you have victory point hexes that are like literally on the map edge, like they are half hexes in some cases. And I wish it was not that way. I wish we could have done something to move the map edge a little bit further, or maybe provide some additional victory hexes more inward on the map so that you can actually play around that. It is awkward to kind of be fighting at the map edges to get those victory points, and the game incentivizes you to do that because they're there. Um, but you end up in the very strange state of the way that the game operates at the edges, like any war game. And I just wish we could have maybe done something different. I don't know. Now, that was partially just my choice of what victory hexes I went after. I certainly could have focused on other victory point hexes, but my formations were near those ones. I might as well go for them. And I just wish we could have done something better there. The other thing, and I had this beef with AirCore, the game can end in a draw, and I don't like draws typically, or tied games. Um, but I don't think the game suffers for these things. These are more nitpicks than anything. And ultimately, the game is a lot of fun, and I've had a really good time with it. The final point that I would want to hit here is a question of whether or not this is a good starting game for BCS. And I think when the game first came out, when you compared it to last Blitzkrieg, it certainly would have seemed like a better first game to get because it's smaller, there's fewer units. Um, but I think as the game series has matured and progressed, AeroCore I think is the best starting point. I don't know that I would recommend Baptism by Fire as the first game. Now that goes with the caveat that if you like the campaign and like you just want to own a game on the campaign of Castering, like okay, buy the game. Like don't. This is this is focusing too much on the like the newbie mentality. Just buy the game that you want and play the game that you want. That's always a valid choice. You can make do by having any game in the series be your first game in the series. But if you're really trying to say like, okay, which one's the best for the newcomer, I think AeroCore still holds that. I think it was designed to be where this maybe wasn't necessarily designed to be. I mean, it is a game for the topic that it's covering, but I think the challenge for the allies is so high, if especially if you're getting used to the system, um, because you were forced to figure out how to defend uh, rather than attack at all. Really, it is. I feel like you've got to figure out how you're going to play that because the more experienced players should probably play the allies, the less experienced players should play the axis. If you're just learning the system, you're going to have those challenges to surmount. You're going to have to figure out how to play it. Where AeroCore, by comparison, both sides have opportunities to attack and defend, and you can kind of explore the game operations very well as either side. Here, there's a lot of Germans just attacking, 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 and the Allies trying to do a layered defense. I think that's a distinct set of operations that maybe once you've gotten used to AeroCore and you kind of know the system a bit better, you can apply that here and know that it's going to be a distinct sort of game experience. But I would feel like a new player who's still just learning how to play the game, if they're playing the allies, maybe two brand new people to the system trying to learn it and play it. Well, the allied player could make some very critical mistakes and maybe feel like they're not going to have fun with the game as they play it because they're getting rolled up. They just don't know how to get traction. Where I think AeroCore gave us either side enough slack that you can kind of see the way the game operates without some really nasty things occurring in the game. Because ultimately, like once one formation loses a battalion entirely, or starts to lose its supporting units to its left or right, and you can just start getting wrapped up and defeated, you can see a formation fall apart. You can build up momentum, and in my game the Axis were able to do that. I just didn't play well. And that's from me having played BCS before, and I just made some foolish mistakes and didn't realize how to defend better. Right, that's on me. But especially a new player could have a lot of challenge with that. So I don't think that's a knock against the game, really. I just say, as a new player for BCS, I would point you to AeroCore rather than Baptism by Fire. But if you really, really like this topic, play it and just, I guess if you're watching this review, right, keep that in mind. really think about how the ally should be defending, going into terrain that they can defend properly. Don't defend too far forward. Let the Axis have a few victory points because they need to reach at least 9 to win. So if you can keep them at 8 or below, you can win the game, and make sure you think about whether or not prepared defense is a value. If you do those things, which I did not, you'll have a better time as the allies. So yeah, so let's wrap things up here, folks. Baptism by Fire, entering BCS, awesome game. Had a lot of fun with it. Really glad I got to play it. I actually really look forward to playing this opposed at some point because solitaire is a lot of fun. Even with BCS, solitaire is just fine. It's a lot of fun to play. Opposed, it's fun. I've played BCS opposed. I think this campaign would be very interesting in an opposed game, as both sides are kind of figuring out how to operate, and maybe some more surprising moves can occur, and fight a tough allied defense of somebody who knows how to do that. Would be very fun for me as the Axis, or vice versa, or whatever. I just think this is a lot of goodness here, folks. So highly recommend this if you want a game on the campaign. And ultimately, every game in the BCS series so far has been a real winner for me. So I feel like I'm just dropping more water in a bucket that's already full of people praising the series and the system and the games. But you have my confirmation that it's really good experience. Highly recommend it. I'm not sure if this is in stock any longer at MMP. You might be stuck with the secondary market. So I would encourage you to try to find a copy if you can. Maybe someday it'll get reprinted, but I wouldn't expect it. So keep that in mind. Anyway, that's it, folks. Hope you enjoyed this review video. Hopefully it was informative to you, or at least interesting to watch and listen to. We'll wrap it up here. I appreciate it. Take care, keep on gaming, and we'll see you in the next one.